Hey guys, I am back. I can go for a relatively long period of time now without hurting my voice by talking. So I figured I'd go ahead and get back to doing reviews for you guys, starting where we left off with episode 24, Indirect Kiss. We're just one episode away now from one of my all-time favorite episodes of the show, which is actually the show's first genuine two-part episode. And while I am pretty excited about that, that's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about an episode that is probably equally good. An episode that is surprising in how important it is to the Steven Universe lore, and an episode that really made me glad that I'm going back and doing these reviews because I caught a thing that I missed going through this episode the first time. But we will get to that in a moment. As per usual, there will be spoilers in this review, so keep that in mind while you're watching it if you haven't seen the episode. This episode begins with Steven and Connie having a picnic date on top of the hill that is above the temple, and I call it a picnic date because that's exactly what it is. There's literally no other way to describe it. The two of them are meeting to have a picnic in this idyllic location. They even almost have a kiss at the end, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Point is, it was absolutely freaking adorable. However, Steven, when he first shows up and throughout the majority of their date, does seem quite depressed about something, and with a little bit of pushing and prodding, Connie gets him to open up about it. Firstly, there is now a fence around the hill above the temple, a fence that I don't think we ever see again. I'm going to keep an eye out for that going forward. A fence that was put there because Amethyst, being Amethyst, decided it was a good idea to stand on the cliff of the hill above the temple, and then she accidentally fell and cracked her gem. And Steven tries to pass it off as, oh no, she hurt herself, now Pearl's going to put up a fence. He doesn't want to talk about the rest, but Connie presses and gets him to open up, and he continues the story, and Pearl is actually visibly worried about Amethyst. Usually she isn't. Usually she just kind of tells Amethyst off for being irresponsible, but this time she genuinely seems worried and upset, which creates a great contrast here and really hammers home without any exposition exactly how dangerous a cracked gem is to gems. But Amethyst isn't worried despite the fact that she has lost control of her left eye. It's now all bugged out and she isn't controlling it anymore. It's just kind of googling around like a Google eye. And it's all posturing. You can tell it's all posturing. And this is when Garnet approaches Steven and tells him about one of his mother's powers that he didn't know about before, says that when she genuinely loved people around her and genuinely felt bad for them being injured, she could produce healing tears that originated in her gemstone and heal other gems, heal their gemstones themselves. Which actually ties back into Monster Buddies, where Garnet told Steven that Rose tried to heal the corrupted gems and wasn't able to, which means that either the type of injury that creates corrupted gems is entirely different, or there is a point of no return, a point where damage to a gemstone becomes so great that it can't be undone. Before the gemstone actually shatters, I would imagine. And Steven tries to call on this power. He does it in what is supposed to be a really comical scene, and they do a good job with it. It's clearly meant to kind of parody a scene in an anime where the character calls upon their power. I feel like it was a little out of place in an episode with a relatively serious tone, but what are you going to do? But he is not able to make himself cry, despite the fact that Steven has no hang-ups about crying. So the gems decide that they're going to take Amethyst to Rose's fountain, which this is the thing that I didn't catch in my other viewings of this episode, which honestly have not been as many as they probably should have been. When the fountain is first described to Steven, it's not described as Rose's fountain, it's described as Rose's healing spring. The fountain is just there to direct the water from some spring that Rose created in the earth. No idea what that means yet. I'm going to really think about it, see if it connects to anything else, maybe do a video on it, but point is, the fact that the fountain itself is not the source of the healing water, that something else is an interesting and, I think, important bit of information. And all throughout this episode, you get little glimpses of the framing device, Steven and Connie hanging out. In fact, one of the ways that Connie was able to get Steven to continue the story was to let him wear her glasses in exchange for drinking the rest of his juice box. It was a very cute, kiddish thing, I just wanted to point out, especially since it does become important later on down the line. And I want to focus on the cute for a little bit here because what comes is pretty disturbing. As her gem continues to crack more and more, Amethyst continues to lose control of more and more of her functions. She starts talking backwards, and later on she starts making random sounds that aren't even speech at all. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself again. Her body starts to literally break apart and rearrange itself outside of her control, not just shapeshifting. She doesn't turn into light and then rearrange herself into something else. the parts of her body literally pop into different places. Her physical form is growing more and more unstable as the damage to her gem becomes more and more severe, giving us a way of gauging just how serious this is becoming. But they are now at Rose's fountain, which is entirely overgrown by these thorny vines, and Pearl is losing it. She is freaking out, not just because the fountain is in disarray, but because they can't help Amethyst. She genuinely wants to help, and there's nothing she can do because they can't even get to the fountain. And Garnet, up until this point, she seems to be her regular stoic self, but then she takes this giant boulder and punches it through the vines as a way of getting through the vines, and she says, just really subtly to herself, I needed that, implying that she is being affected by this as well. She's just not letting it show. And all throughout all of this, Steven is continuing to try to get himself to cry so that he can save Amethyst, because it looks like they may not get the fountain uncovered in time to get it working and get Amethyst healed. It even goes so far as Steven sees the fountain, which is in the visage of his mother, and he expects to cry when he sees her, when he sees this scale representation of her. But he doesn't, because he doesn't know how to feel about his mother because he never met her. And it's just so emotional and so raw. And even manages to get Connie crying about it because it is so emotional and it is so raw. And then Pearl and Garnet leave to try to unclog the fountain so that it works again, and Steven and Amethyst are being chased around by plants, like literally by the vines, and then later these little bush things that move around, kind of like the Watermelon Stevens that we will see a little bit later in the episode Watermelon Steven. And they finally end up in the fountain when when all the emotion finally catches up to him and he does cry on Amethyst's gem. It does absolutely nothing. Then the fountain turns back on, and at first he thinks he did it himself, that his tears healed the fountain. But then Pearl and Garnet show up after the vines and the bushes have all turned into more pink flowers, more rose flowers, and the eyes of the fountain have literally opened up and cried literal tears. Pearl and Garnet show up and simply explain that they unclogged a blockage from the spring to the fountain, and that's what did it. And with everything that's been going on today, with all of the raw emotion hitting him and all of the feelings of inadequacy when he couldn't cry and bring those powers to the surface, Steven takes this to mean that the gems don't believe in him and don't think he'll ever get any more magical powers, which is a bit of a leap, but the kid is, like 13 at this point, so I could kind of get it. In all honesty, the gems don't explain nearly as much to him as they should. But Connie reassures him that she's sure that everything will work out. Even if he doesn't get his powers, he'll just be like her, and then they can spend more time together. And it's at this point she has her glasses back. That's important. She leans in. She's going to kiss him. But before she does, she gets a headache from having the glasses on, because as she takes them off, she realizes that she doesn't need them anymore. She's been drinking Steven's juice box with all of his backwash in it, and the backwash healed her eyes. Steven doesn't have healing tears. He has healing spit, which sounds really gross, but is actually pretty awesome. As Steven freaks out, he immediately wants to tell the gems. Connie is also freaking out, though, and this is going to tie into later episodes when we're dealing with Connie's relationship with her family. She doesn't know what to tell them. She's been keeping them relatively in the dark regarding all the magical stuff she's been involved with, and now suddenly her eyes are healed, and her vision was bad. Like, really bad. So this isn't something that she can just pretend away forever, but she pops the lenses out of her glasses and puts them back on, as if she intends to try. This episode just had so much going on in it. I can't even express how much is going on in this episode. I've been so jumbled and out of sequence with this review because things just keep popping into my head, things that I want to talk about. So let's talk about a couple of the big ones here, because I'm sure I'll talk about some of this other stuff later in other videos. But let's talk about a couple things here that I feel like are really important to the lore of the show, starting with Rose's Fountain. Rose's Fountain, which seems very similar to some of the iconography we have seen in homeworld structures. And this, in and of itself, I could go on about for hours, so I'm just going to keep it really simple here, that I really want to know when exactly that fountain was built, because I feel like that will be very telling about a lot of things, about Rose's status on homeworld, about how she was looked up to by humans and other crystal gems, when she discovered her powers, when she started using her powers to create living plants, because clearly she uses her powers to create living plants for some purpose. I did do a theory about it recently, but of course that theory could be incorrect. Needless to say, I want to see the fountain again, and I want to learn more about it, and the healing spring, and where they came from, and when they came into existence. We also see here our first real instance, aside from his version of shapeshifting, which still does come from his gem still does glow first, of one of Stephen's powers, his gem powers, being translated entirely through one of his biological processes. And it makes me wonder, does he have any other powers that are translated solely through his biological processes? And we see another one, possibly another one, in Watermelon Stephen, when he brings some watermelon seeds to life and they grow into smaller replicas of himself. But honestly, that could have just been his healing spit, because he does spit the watermelon seeds. We'll talk about that more in that episode. The point is, this is an entirely new portrayal of a gem power, and I don't know that every viewer who watches this episode realizes that, or how significant that actually is. This episode also really gets you thinking about the nature of corrupted gems, what kind of damage exactly turned them into corrupted gems. Because in a lot of ways, Amethyst's body changing, her losing control of her voice, even one scene where her body literally reverses itself and she ends up walking in a direction other than the one she intended. All of those could be considered earlier versions of some of the behaviors of the corrupted gems. Not being able to speak, having bodies that are entirely animalistic, not being entirely in control of their actions. But does this mean that gem corruption is physical, that damage to the gem causes it? Or is it mental damage, as a lot of people also theorize? Or is there really any difference? Isn't the gemstone just the gem's brain in the first place? So much to think about that I can't even talk about it all in one episode. So much to think about that I can't even really talk about at all, because it literally is just stuff to think about with no additional details or evidence given, because we haven't revisited any of these situations yet. Not that I want someone else's gemstone to get broken, except that from a narrative standpoint, I kind of do. Either way, I am starting to ramble, so I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Guys, what did you think about this episode if you've seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below about any of the topics that I brought up in this video. I would be happy to discuss any of them with you. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow in my first two-part Steven Universe review.